Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Mizan Sunday. This Sunday, the first of our fourth Sundays for 2024 of the new year in the Gregorian calendar, we celebrate the new year, but we wanted to open the new year this year with a special Taleem. If you're a frequent viewer, you know that we always mention the Al Mizan Sunday. It's led by a sister from the WDM community, but that the content is in no way meant for an all-female audience. In fact, this Taleem, held on the fourth Sunday of each month, was commissioned by Imam Wazir as a means to provide a balanced perspective of interpreting Quran and Sunnah. So, with practical applications for our everyday lives. So, today, as a refresher on that concept of Al Mizan or the balance, we have Sister Naimah Mustafa, who is going to be presenting or expounding on the topic of knowing your worth, or reflecting upon the Arabic root of Al Mizan, wazana. Sister Naimah, if you don't know her, she's become well known in our community for her attention to detail of not only the Arabic grammar and its translation as a student turned teacher, but she also provides practical ways to reflect upon Allah's words as a teacher for Islamic Learning Institute. And she's also a monthly Taleem teacher for Master New Africa Center for Human Development. So go over there and check out some of her Taleems if you haven't seen them thus far. So I present to you Sister Naimah Mustafa. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam, Sister Sandira. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, pretty good.
Alhamdulillah, good to hear. And assalamu alaikum to the community at large, but also Masjid Wafdi Muhammad community. And also I wanted to say thank you for inviting me to present today. As Sister Sandira stated, what I'm about to say is I was double booked because I was scheduled to do a presentation right before this for Masjid New Africa with Sister Latifa facilitating, and then doing this with Sister Sandira. So alhamdulillah, but I appreciate the invitation, and I look forward to presenting what I found, and I pray that it's beneficial and up to the standards of Al Mizan Sunday. So with that being said, I want to just start out. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. So as Sister Sandira stated, I got to remember to say Sandira instead of Latifa. Knowing your worth, a reflection on the Arabic root of Al Mizan. The root of that word is wazana. So, and I'm glad the Sister Sandira went over again why it is termed Al Mizan Sunday, because when I was researching this, and after I started doing the research, and I text Sister Sandira, and I was like, I think I have the title for this. I said, tell me again, why is it called Al Mizan? And she explained what she explained there, and I was asking because right, Mizan, Al Mizan, right, and we're familiar with this word, and we often hear it as right balance or scale, and in that manner, or the practical application of right to balance something out. And so I was expecting when I started researching this, I was expecting to find something more technical or something that just was very static on a tool of balancing or something with that kind of origin, right, or derivative, and I can see how this word translates into that. But what I found, I was like, oh my goodness. So when I just want to know how is this word used in the Quran? So I just basically typed into Google, what are the different forms of wazana in the Quran? And it took me to a page on Corpus Quran, right? And it says that, wazana occurs 23 times in 4 derived forms, right, in the Quran. It broke down, 16 times is this, 3 times is this, right? That was a little bit, you can always go back to Corpus Quran and get that detail. I just really want to show the 4 forms, right? It occurs as a verb, right? As wazinu, the plural form of the verb, right? It occurs as nouns, right? We have Mizan, or the plural mawazin. It also occurs as the noun, subhanallah, waznun, and then it occurs as a passive participle, malzun. And one of the things that I was sharing at the previous presentation I was doing with M&A was that, sometimes when you're invited to present or at anything, right, even outside of the Muslim community, as it were, maybe wherever. But when you're invited to present, in terms of like Taleems and we have a lot of Ramadan sessions, things of that nature. And especially if you're not used to it, and I don't know, even if you are used to it, it may still be this type of feeling, but there can be, that's supposed to be Mizan, I apologize. But there's a feeling of, there's a responsibility that comes with it, right? Because you want to make sure that what you're presenting is correct. You want to make sure that you're not saying anything that's incorrect, right? But there's also, so sometimes there's this weighted feeling of responsibility. I always jokingly say, but like true joke, is some truth in it, that I feel as if these are like assignments. But then every time, mashallah, that I complete it to the extent that I feel like, yes, I feel like I can present this, right? I feel like this is in a presentable form. It's always something that I learn from it. It's always a learning opportunity for me. And I mean that. Right. I mean that. It's always a learning opportunity that I take something from it, even if nobody listens to it. Right. That I take something from it that's like, wow, I did not know that. I did not know that. And mashallah, it benefits me. And I pray that it benefits others that are listening as well. So it occurs 23 times in the Quran, the wazana, or in 4 derived forms. And these are the forms. So, for example, some of the examples that it did give, it gave Surah Al-Isra, ayat 35, where it says, وَأَوْفُوا الْكَيْلَ إِذَا كِلْتُمْ وَزِنُوا. Subhanallah, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Allah Ta'ala says, وَأَوْفُوا الْكَيْلَ إِذَا كِلْتُمْ وزنوا بالقسطاس المستقيم ذلك خير وأحسن تأويلا. All right. So the translation of that is, give in full measure when you measure, and weigh with an even balance. That is the fairest and the best in the end. Excuse me. And then another example that it gives is Surah Al-An'am, ayat 152, where Allah Ta'ala says, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا مَالَ الْيَتِيمِ إِلَّا بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ حَتَّى يَبْلُغَ أَشُدَّهُ وَأَوْفُوا الْكَيْلَ. He said again, وَأَوْفُوا الْكَيْلَ وَالْمِيزَانَ بِالْقِسْطِ لا نكلف نفسا إلا وسعها وإذا قلتم فاعدلوا ولو كان ذا قربى وبعهد الله أوفوا ذلكم وصاكم به لعلكم تذكرون. And the translation of that one is, and do not come near the wealth of the orphan unless you're intending to enhance it, right? Don't go near it until they attain maturity. Give full measure and wait with justice. We never require of any soul more than it can afford. Whenever you speak, maintain justice, even regarding a close relative, and fulfill your covenant with Allah. This is what He has commanded you, so perhaps you will be mindful. And then the last example, they gave a number. I told you it says it's 23 times, and they give you every space that it occurs in the Quran. I just picked a few out of them. Another place is in Surah Ar-Rahman, ayat 9. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسير الميزان, right? And here you have two forms here, but they're both as nouns, right? And then the translation here is weigh with justice and do not give short measure, right? So wazana, Sister Sandira stated at the beginning, right, is often used in a way that kind of reflects, or that is used to mean like balance or weighing, right? And that's actually a practical definition of it, right? Wazana, right, from the dictionary of the Holy Quran, to weigh, right, to judge, to measure, right? They weigh a weight, right? Weight, balance, measure. Mawazin, right, is something that's evenly and equally balanced in due proportion, right? And that's found in the dictionary of the Holy Quran. If you're familiar with using that, right, you just look up wazana and you'll get all of these different forms. And even in the dictionary of the Holy Quran, it reiterates that this root and its different forms are used in the Holy Quran about 23 times. So I, with that information, right, I went to one of my Arabic dictionaries and said, well, let me see what it says there. Not because Dictionary of the Holy Quran is wrong in any light, right? I don't do it for that reason. I do it to try, because sometimes the Arabic, because sometimes you can only translate certain things to the level of the language that you're using to translate it, right? And in the Arabic dictionary, you can get a translation that may be a bit more primal, because you're explaining it with its original language, if that makes sense. So not to go, into too much. Basically, right, in the Arabic dictionary, right, when you look up wazana, one of the first definitions that comes is this one that I have highlighted, right? It says ma'rifatu qadri ash-shay. Ma'rifatu qadri ash-shay. And if you're seeing this, or or if my pronunciation is any good, right, you're seeing that, right, in that first word for wazana, in defining it, we get the word arafa, right? And you're like, arafa? This is talking about wazana, right? These are scales, right? Arafa, right? Arafa. That's a word that we know, right? We know what arafa. We hear that all the time, arafa, right? And then you get this word here, qadr, right? And then ash-shay, right? We know that means things. So I'm going to dive into this a little bit, but loosely translated, right? Wazana from the Arabic dictionary that I use. And I'm sorry, it just says Arabic, because even the name, it's a PDF that I have. Wazana in that dictionary, loosely translated, the meaning of it means knowing the value of something. Knowing the value of something, right? Wazana, knowing the value of something. So when I first read that, I was like, oh, right, because I'm thinking I'm going to get something that's very practical. Oh yeah, it's just, it's a scale, you just weigh, right? But it says knowing the value of something, right? So then what I did is I went, because I noticed that the first word was ma'rifu, right? Ma'rifa. And so I said, well, let me look up what it says about arafa, right? And so here it gave this, the very first definition here was idraku ash-shay bitafakkar wa tadabbar, right? And again, with arafa, tafakkar, fakkaru, dabbara, right? These are all words that allude to a form of thinking, right? Something that you're doing with your brain, right? To get the effect of it, right? Li ithrihi wa huwa aqassu min al-ilm wa yudadduhu al-inkar, right? And so again, loosely translated, this is saying basically Arafat is where basically you're perceiving or you're recognizing something by considering and pondering with care and attention, as well as considering the issues or results of the affairs or action with deep thought. And I came to that definition without, this would have been a very long presentation if I broke down all of these words. But so tefekkar, if you look up tefekkar or fakkar, fa, kaf, ra, and Deborah, dal, ba, ra in the dictionary of the Holy Quran or any dictionary, you'll get a deeper meaning of those words. And I just put them here because if you put that in Google, what it's going to come out and say is perceiving something by contemplating it and contemplating it, right? It's going to give you the same meaning, right? But these are two, they have, just like arafat, even though there's an aspect of knowing, right? It's a different meaning from ilm. And so as well, to fakara and debara have, even though they're about thinking about something, contemplating, they have certain nuances where they're different. But this one is saying that arafat includes both of those processes of tefekkar and tadabbur. And if I were translating that, I would say, okay, this is basically you're perceiving or recognizing something by considering and pondering with care and attention, as well as considering the issues or the results of the affairs or action with deep thought. And then it goes on to say, so where it says here, right, this one here, that part is saying that arafat is more specific than ilm, right? Arafat is more specific than ilm. And then it's saying the opposite of arafat, the last part of that is denial, right? So the opposite of arafat is basically you're denying it, right? Which makes sense if you think about it, because if you put all of this energy into understanding the value of something, its significance, all of that, and after all of that, you still feel like, no, that's not right. And then you're basically just denying it, right? You're basically just denying. So it's saying it's more specific than knowledge. Knowledge could be, oh, I know 4 + 4 is 8, right? Right. I have that in my knowledge base, maybe by a rote flashcard, maybe by somebody told me, so I know it. Right. But if I go sit down and I put 4 apples here, 4 apples here, and I move those around and I do all of this, and it all comes back to say, oh no, that really is 8. I know it now. I did my due diligence to make sure I understood. I thought on it deeply. I understood why it's 8. Now that's something where I can say no. I recognize that that's 8, right? Rather than I just know, right? So it's saying the opposite of arafat is denial, right? You're denying it. So and then it says mu'arifat to qadri as-shay. That was the original definition of wazna. So qadr, right? We know qadr when we think about the qadr of Allah, right? Basically or things that are meant to be, your status, those things that are meant to be. It's already there. It's already planned out. It's the power that Allah has in having a full knowledge of everything. But in the dictionary of the Holy Quran, right, it also, if you're looking at qadr as a noun, it defines it as power, estimation, appreciation, measure, majesty, honor, ability, and value, right? So then if I were to go back and take this definition, right, of wazna, ma'rifat to qadri as-shay, right, and knowing what I know now, that I know now basically arifat and qadr, right, and we know as-shay, right, is thing or something, right? If I were to go then and translate that based on what I know about arifat and qadr, and I know as-shay is thing, right, then I could now give a more detailed definition of wazna. And I will note here that the first definition it gave was this. The second one, it is basically saying here that what it's saying here is that the word wazna, right, the way that we know it with the community, right, basically the practical application, the practical knowledge, common layman's terms, if you will, of wazna is that it's something that you measure with by a scale or a balance, right? What we commonly know when we say wazna, oh, you're talking about a scale, you're talking about a balance, right? But this is the first definition that is mentioned, which is knowing the value power of a thing. So with all of that information, if I go back and I say, okay, what then is the meaning of wazana based on this phrase, ma'rifatu qadri ash-shay, then you can say it's perceiving or recognizing the ability, power, and value of something or someone by deeply and meticulously considering their issues and affairs, the results of your interactions with them, and or its effect on our mutual affairs and environment, right? Wazana. And so if we look at Surah, go back to that very first one, Surah Al-Isra, ayat 35, where Allah says, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, wa awfu al-kayla idha kiltum wazinu bil qistas al-mustaqim, right? So that first sentence, and fulfill the measure when you measure and weigh, right? It's specifically saying this is what you need to do when you do this act, when you're interacting in this transactional way. And it says, ذَلِكَ خَيْرٌ وَأَحْسَنُ تَأْوِيلًا, right? This is better for you overall. But it says here, right, to measure with bilqist, it can mean justice, but it's also like it's also a term for like a scale or a balance, right? And then this al-mustaqim is an adjective describing bilqis, right? What type of scale? It's an upright scale, right? We say sirat al-mustaqim. We say it all the time, right? The upright, and it's saying you measure, right? When you fulfill the measure, when you measure and weigh, do it with an upright scale, right? So practically, right, we know that means, right, measure it. When you're talking about a scale, we know the practical way is you're talking about a scale or a balance, right? You put the weight on, you have something weighted that's a certain weight. You put the object that you're measuring, it should equilibrate, right? And then you should be able to say, yeah, this weighs this much. However much it weighs converts to a certain value, right? And in transactions in business, that's how that's done. And essentially, that's like the gold standard. Everything else is built on that, right? In terms of how we say, this is what this is worth, or this is what, and that's practical, right? But if we think of it from kind of a psychosocial perspective, right? How does this work when we're not talking about just going into business and taking my fruit or my item and getting it weighed and someone telling me this is how much this costs, right? There is a kind of a psychological, psychosocial aspect of this that's actually described in the definitions, but it would have taken so much to go into it. So the best way I could present it is in the following slides. So the question comes in, right? Allah says, weigh and measure with an upright scale, right? Upright scale. But what happens, right, when we're not using that upright scale, right? Which the upright scale should be the remembrance of Allah, remembering of what Allah has said, his pleasure, knowing that we are always under his watchful eye, and we try to do what is right and do what is according to what is upright and what is pleasing to Allah, right? That's an upright scale, right? If I'm thinking it from a psychological or an abstract perspective, right? If I'm thinking it from a physical scale, you're basically, okay, if I'm in business, my scale better be calibrated properly, it better measure properly, don't cheat the people, make sure your stuff is right, because you need to be doing proper business. Abstractly, what happens when that upright scale that we're supposed to be using, we're not using it, or whatever scale that we're using, what happens when it's broke, right? Or it's out of balance, or it's miscalibrated? What scale are we using, right? When we are considering the value of something or someone, when we're considering their worth, when we're considering the power that they offer to a community, an environment, a place, a thing, what scale are we using, right? So Surah Al-A'raf, right? Allah speaks about Prophet Shuaib, right? And in Ayah 85, this is, I'll read the Arabic and then I'll just go to the translation. I know it's a lot. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wa ila madyana akhahum shu'aiba. Qala ya qawmi u'budu ya قوم اعبدوا الله ما لكم من إله غيره قد جاءتكم بينات من ربكم. And here he says again, فَأَوْفُوا الْكَيْلَ وَالْمِيزَانَ وَلَا تَبْخَسُوا النَّاسَ أشياءهم ولا تفسدوا في الأرض بعد إصلاحها ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم مؤمنين. And the translation of that is, and to the people of Midian we sent their brother Shu'aib. He said, "O my people, worship Allah. You have no other God except him, and clear proof has already come to you from your Lord. So give just measure and weight," right? "Do not defraud people of their property, nor spread corruption in the land after it has been set in order. This is for your own good if you are truly believers." Right. So the first example of this from a practical, when we think about the practical application of the word wazana, right? We think about, okay, a scale, a weight, all right? Then you think about this is business, this is transactional, right? Don't cheat the people, right? When they come to you and you're doing transactions and business with them, don't cheat them, right? Be fair, be honest, be right. Don't give them short measure. Don't say it's this much and it's really not. Don't say that if their stuff is worth $30, you give them $20, right? If they bring you something that's 5 pounds, you weigh it and you got your scale rigged so it looks like it's 2 pounds, right? Something of that nature. Don't cheat the people. And so the tafsir on that is, it talks about the Median people, and it gives a little history saying that the territory, this is Al-Maududi, the territory of Midian lay to the northwest of Hijaz and to the south of Palestine, in the eastern side of the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aqaba, and extended to part of the Sinai Peninsula. So it's just giving you kind of geographically where this region was. But it says the Midianites were great traders. Their habitations lay at the crossroads of the trade routes from Yemen, Mecca to Syria, along the side of the Red Sea from Iraq to Egypt. Right. So they're in a prime location too. Right. And therefore they were well known among the Arabs and were remembered even after their extermination for their trade caravans to Syria and Egypt. Because their trade caravans to Syria and Egypt had to pass through their archaeological remains. Right. So they were well known because because this was a very prosperous route, right? This is like, if you want to say, forget what it's called, when your business is in a good spot, you got traffic, very good traffic, right? And so through even after the Midian people were destroyed because of their transgressions, this route was still traveled by traders and caravans. So, this story was retold about the Midian people because people would go through and say, yeah, this is what happened here, right? So it says, in order to grasp the significance of their story in the Quran, it should be noted that the Midianites claim to be the descendants of Midian, a son of Prophet Abraham from his third wife, Keturah. Though all of them had not directly descended from him, they claimed to be so. According to an ancient custom, all of those people who became attached to some great man began by and by to be counted among his descendants. So basically, everybody was claiming to be from this great man. And it goes on to give examples. This is why all the Arabs are called Bani Ismail, even though all of them didn't descend from him. It was just, as time went on, yeah, basically you were around it. Okay, yeah, you descended from it. But the thing about Prophet Shu'aib and the Midianites was that he was sent because what they were doing, they were great traders, but they were cheating the people, right? So I read this to show that this was a community that was in a prime position, right? That was set for success, right? And they were destroyed because of their cheating people and doing wrong by the people, right? And so my question, what happens when your scale is off? How does that affect the way you value not only yourself, but the way you value the people around you and the community around you when you're not measuring the value of the people around you or the environment that you in with the right scale, right? How does that affect you? And then when Prophet Shu'aib came to try to guide them aright, they ignored it and were destroyed because of it. So their situation from a psychological, from an abstract perspective, right? If I am cheating these people, my own people, right, and in my trade I'm cheating them, then I'm not valuing these people, right? I'm not considering the value, one, that these people have as being my customers, right? That this is could be a long-term business relationship. If these people are part of my community, I'm not valuing what they bring as customers, as part of my community. So I'm cheating them. Right now, they're being cheated. Now maybe they can't succeed, they can't evolve, right? Because I'm taking all their money because I'm cheating them. So now you have an imbalanced community. You're going to have certain aspects that arise from that, from people who are feeling cheated, feeling like they're struggling, like they're on this hamster wheel. They can never get ahead, and the trials and the challenges that come with that, right? But that's all from someone not really contemplating the value of what you have, right? If their scale was based on the Bilqis, the Mustaqim, right, they wouldn't have done that. That wouldn't have occurred, right? But their scale was broken because they weren't using the upright scale. Their scale was, I'm weighing this against how successful can I be, right? For whatever reason, I'm cheating these people. I feel like there's something that weighs more than the pleasure of Allah. Right? It could be that I'm fearful that I'm not going to be rich anymore. I'm fearful of losing my place in the community. I'm fearful of just not having what I normally have. So the scale, the weight that I'm using, that weight that I put on the balance to measure it out, right? That weight that I'm using is heavier in my mind than the weight of the pleasure of Allah. So my scale is miscalibrated. So now I'm weighing, cheating the people, and I'm making that equal with the choice to cheat the people, right? Now this is how I'm weighing this out, and this is how I'm making my choice. And the result of it is I have a community, right, that is now not as prosperous or not as balanced as it could be because I'm doing all of these evil things in the community. So from a community perspective, when we think about wazana, right, you think about the fact that how do I approximate the value of my interactions in the community, the value of the people in the community, the people that I interact with? Am I taking the time to really consider what are the capabilities of the people in my community? What is their value of, if I'm a businessman in the community, what's the value of having these people as my customers? Customer retention. Is it worth it to cheat people and maybe lose customers because it doesn't matter because I'm in a prime spot? I'm going to get more customers anyway. It doesn't matter if my reputation goes down. People know I'm cheating because they can't do nothing about it because I'm so big. It doesn't matter, right? But the morale of your community goes down, right? And then just the maintenance of a proper environment of uprightness, right, in your community goes down, right? So that's one abstract application of wazana, right? When you're not considering, you're not really thinking on and considering the value of the people around you. So you make choices, right, that don't reflect the upright scale. It reflects the scale that you've decided is the scale that you want to use. My prosperity. How rich can I get? How can I keep my position in the community? How can I keep, somebody in my circle? How can I keep them on top and keep you down, right? And then in Surah Al-Isra, where it says, وَأَوْفُوا الْكَيْلَ إِذَا كِلْتُمْ وَزِنُوا بِالْقِسْطَاسِ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ ذَلِكَ خَيْرٌ وَأَحْسَنُ تَأْوِيلًا. Here in the tafsir for this, it goes on to even speak more on the fact that although these are practical advices when you're dealing in transaction and trade, how it affects generally a community as a whole. So it says this instruction, this is my duty again, It says this instruction was not confined to individuals only, but has been made a part of the duties of an Islamic government to supervise transactions in the markets and streets to see that that exact measures and weights are being observed, right? So this is from a practical transactional perspective. It also is there to prevent the breach and violation by force of law, right? So if you are cheating the people, the law is going to get you. This is something that is in the Islamic government is what they're saying. But afterwards, it was made one of the duties of the government to eradicate dishonesty in all commercial dealings and economic transactions. But overall, though, where it says in the end, this will be the best for you, it says in the end, it will be best in this world and it will be best in the hereafter, right? It's best in this world because when you're not cheating people, right, and when you're respecting everyone's value, everyone's power, everyone's rank, if you will, their value in your community for whatever they have to offer, they're valuable, right? It says it's best in this world because it produces mutual trust. I believe that's supposed to be trust between sellers and buyers. And then as a result of this, commerce prospers and there's a general prosperity, right? If everybody prospers. And as regards to the hereafter, the end depends wholly on honesty, piety, and fear of God, right? Taqwa, right? My scale has to be calibrated with the right type of weight. If the weight is not calibrated to taqwa, right, then everything is going to be mismeasured. Your weight is going to be off because you're not. It's not calibrated on the right thing, right? So, so I'll come back because the Western, a lot of times, even in the Quran, in the way that it's used based on a lot of times the scale, right? Transactions, as is stated here. But if you look at it from, again, a community perspective, or even just interactional perspective, right? Like, how am I dealing with people, right? And what scale am I using to measure the weight of the people that I interact with, right? Am I devaluing people because in my mind, the scale I'm using is my own puffed up weight? That one of the definitions that was given for wazn in a kind of a use of it from a social perspective is like throwing your weight around, right? Another one was when a person is calculated in how they choose to move with people, how they choose to interact with people, right? So when we interact with people, are we judging them based on what we feel like? Oh, I'm better than you because of this, so I can treat you a certain way because I have weighted myself, right? The scale that I'm using is one on maybe arrogance, or the scale that I'm using is one based on, oh, I'm better than you, or you have no value, or I can devalue you to a certain space because I feel like only these people are more important. Oh, you're only important if you have a certain title. You're only important if you run with a certain group, right? So if that's how I'm calibrating my scale of justice, right? My scale, and I'm not using the weight of taqwa to calibrate my scale, then how I treat people is going to be based on what I think is more important, right? What I think should be valued more. And I'm going to use that when I interact with people. And so that's how I'll say, well, you're not as important, right? So you don't need to, you don't need to be in this group, or you don't need to present at this thing. You're not, right? You're not important because maybe you don't know these people. You don't have this much money. You're a woman, right? You are too young, right? All of these things, and from a community level, starts to devalue individuals, and then as a whole it devalues the community, right? Because the scale is not calibrated to al-bilqis al-mustaqim, right? The upright scale, which that should be calibrated to only the pleasure of Allah, and everything else has to weigh up to that, right? So for me, in studying this, as I was researching it, and kind of, you play these things over in your head and you're like, okay, so this is this. And so this commercial came on, or this interview came on, of this woman who's playing in this movie, and she was speaking on how this movie is how she really enjoyed playing this part in this particular movie, because she felt like this is something that really needs to be said, and no one has ever kind of looked at it from this perspective, and she was really adamant about this. I said, well, let me look up this movie that she's talking about. So I looked it up, and I looked at some of the trailers, and I was like, wow, this does seem interesting. So I went to see the movie right that day. I said, let me get a ticket. Let me go see this movie. The name of the movie is called Origins, and it's an Ava DuVernay movie, and it's based on a book by this author. Her name is Isabel Wilkerson, and the name of the book is called Caste, right? Caste, colon, or is it semicolon, which, whatever, the 2 dots, Caste, and then it's called The Origin of Our Discontent, subtitle, right? And I didn't know that I had heard of this woman before until I saw the movie, and I remember that this woman spoke at my daughter's college graduation, and I remember being blown away to a degree of the concepts that she were, what she was putting out there. I was like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. But the movie, and not to tell the whole movie because you may go see it, you may have already seen it, but the movie was really, to an extent, an extension of this aspect of Wezana, right? So she was basically saying, right, that we can compartmentalize why we treat people a certain way. Why is there racism? Why, right? We can make it, it's a black and white thing, or we can make it, it's a male against female in terms of gender inequality, or we can make all of these things, but especially the aspect of racism, right? When we think about that, when you have things that go on, like she mentioned the Holocaust, right, and that that wasn't necessarily aesthetically a difference in race, right? Those injustices that were done, right? One of the key things she focused on in the movie was the traumatic incident of the Trayvon Martin situation, where were 2 so-called minorities, right? But why would one feel that, this wasn't a thing of, oh, this is white and black. But basically, it was the devaluing the worth of someone, right? If your mind, and if you can convince people that someone is not worth anything, that they're worth, she focused on the caste system in India. If you can convince somebody, or if you can convince yourself that you are not worth anything, then the choices that you make in relationship to those people or yourself will reflect that. And most of the time, it will be something that is self-deprecating, or something that is devolving to that people of those communities, right? And so it goes a long way to say that sometimes when we look at situations, right, we may want to step back and instead of sometimes compartmentalizing a lot of these things, to look at it from a perspective of how does this measure in relationship to the upright scale, right? How does this measure to that? Not that there aren't cases where it's strictly, hey, I don't like you because your skin color, I don't like you because you're a woman, or I'm treating you bad, right? But we're not naturally created to be that way to each other. We're not naturally created to think of ourselves that way. So something has come and miscalibrated our scale, such that instead of using the upright scale, we're creating these scales that determine a person's weight, a person's value, a person's measure in the community, how valuable they are. And then we're acting on that, and we're creating some of these atrocities, and even as small as just inequities within our communities, and all communities, our world, our communities, because we are not really seriously taking the time to really contemplate and think on, how do I assess the people around me, right? Their benefit to me, their benefit to our community. What can they bring? Am I encouraging them to really cultivate those bright sparks, right? And then encouraging them to get out there and cultivate and work on it in the community as a whole, and make the community better. So the last thing I'll say on this is, so I think I was listening to something, I may have been reading a hadith, I don't remember, but I remember that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was known that he would often, if not all the time, noticed that there were certain people, and sometimes it was young people, if not most of the time, that had just certain qualities, certain values that he would see, and he would pick them and say, no, you'll do this, and you'll do that, and you'll be responsible for this, and you'll be responsible for that. And it was a way to balance the community, but it was because he saw you have this value in you, right? And it's not that it meant that sometimes things don't have to be checked, that when you allow certain people to step out on that gift or that value, that you don't kind of guide them. I think what comes to mind is, I don't know the hadith word for word, but I know, I think it was Sahaba Mu'adh bin Jabal, right? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam recognized that he just had an affinity. He just got it. The fit on halal and haram. He just got it, right? And so he said, no, you will be good to be, you're going to be teaching this. This is your responsibility to teach this, to make sure that everyone understands it, right? And he was young, right? But he entrusted him with this because he saw that value in him. He saw that, oh, you got this, so you do this. And there was a time where in the prayer, he was leading long prayers, like in his prayers, he was saying like all of Surah Baqarah, or all, these long prayers. And there was a time where I think an older man who couldn't stand that long kind of was like, you got to shorten it. You kind of was like, no, you can't do that. And he basically just like, no, you're taqwa. He really kind of accused him of not being a true believer because he didn't want to stand that whole time. And the elderly man went and told the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Prophet came back and he didn't say, okay, now you can't do this anymore because you made that mistake. He asked them, are you going, is this what you're doing? Right? You're going to be a fitna to the people. It's like, you got to chill. If you want to say those long prayers for your benefit in your own home and tahajjud, your nightly prayer, go and do it. But when you're praying with the community, right, because there's a benefit, right? You can't just devalue this man because he says, no, I can't stand up that long. You have to consider, okay, for the community, the benefit is to keep the community in the congregational prayers. There's a benefit to that. So, you have to kind of consider that. So maybe say the smaller prayers, right? So there's guidance in that, but there's a way to uphold the balance, right? By carefully considering all aspects of a decision that you make and how you view and value a situation or a people or a circumstance, right? So for me, after studying this, Wezna for me is something where it's not an issue, right? The goal is not like equality, like to be the same, right? That, okay, no, I need to, be, if you're a man, I feel like men are, we need to equal things out. I'm not trying to be like the man, right? I'm not trying to go and do every job that the man does, or I'm not trying to be like, quote unquote, because this is just something in our world today. I'm not trying to be like the white person. I'm not trying, right? That's not the goal. The goal is, right, for equality, right, and for balance is to recognize and utilize the innate value, power, and ability of something or someone to build a balanced community, right? The community as a whole has to be balanced, right? And the way that we balance it, how do we calibrate that scale, is that we're balancing it. The other side is, inshallah, the taqwa, right? Recognizing what Allah wants us to do. And inshallah, the pleasure of Allah will allow us to think clearly, think critically on how we interact and how we make decisions for ourselves, for our families, for the people around us, and inshallah for the community as a whole. So that is my reflection on researching the word wazana. Definitely did not expect to get all of that out of it, but mashallah. And so in saying that, I want to say I'm now very proud to be a part of Al-Mizan Sundays, because it has a greater meaning to me now. And alhamdulillah that it was something that was brought to the heart and minds of the leadership to say, no, we want to recognize that there are people in this community that maybe are not given a voice, and they have a value, and they have a worth, and they have something they can bring to the community to balance out how the community is represented. So inshallah, I pray that this was beneficial. Anything that I said that was incorrect is from me. And I pray Allah guides me to something better. And anything that I said that is beneficial to you is from Allah. And I pray that you benefit from it, and Allah increases us in faith and in provisions. I mean, Sister Sandira, I'm done.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Sister Naimah, that was so dynamic. When we presented you with this topic, I was thinking, okay, yeah, she'll give us a definition, and we'll have our Sunday Taleem, subject for the day. But you've given us so much more. I mean, this is my own personal reflection on, just what a scale was about what was on one side versus what was on the other. Okay, yeah, you stack up enough things on one side so that it balances out, but in how you explained it about understanding the worth of the things that were being weighed is the first thing you have to do. You can't weigh things if you don't understand what their value is.
Right.
And I think I took the most from that, and just you saying in order to know if there's an imbalance, you have to know the value of each thing that's being weighed.
Right.
And as it pertains to Al Mizan Sunday, I know Imam Wazir, his intention around empowering the sisters to lead these was that sometimes you don't know if there's an imbalance if a voice isn't in the room, right? If it isn't being heard, if it isn't in the room. But he was aware enough to say, to balance out the perspectives that are being presented here on these ta'aleems, we need to ensure that the voices of the sisters are being heard in their perspective. And your perspective may be the same as the brothers, but then again, what if it isn't?
Right.
And there's an opportunity missed for a higher level of growth and understanding of Quran and Sunnah, and just understanding that each person as an individual may have something more to offer.
Right.
And just some of the influences, I was thinking upon some of the influences around how we value things, especially in our modern day times. You got social media telling you that you're poor if you don't have 15 of these $500 bags.
Right.
Who are you? Like, I'm like, what? No, my bag came from Walmart.
Right.
And I still value that. And I don't have to have a $500 bag. You're not going to trick me into thinking your level of value, or what you think is valuable should be my level of value.
Right.
I want to walk across the Tarak Bridge, not caring, because that bag is going to be somewhere else. I need my light in front of me to be illuminating my journey. So you're not going to be worried about, those material things. And sometimes your coworkers will have you saying, oh, you only worked 8 hours? I work 12 hours. And you're thinking, no, I have 3 kids at home and a spouse, and I value my time with them more than, putting on some superficial, like I'm a better employee, so I deserve more, or whatever it is that you think you're getting by doing that, or whatever.
Right.
It's just so many ways to view that and use it in your life to say, am I putting value on things that I should or shouldn't be doing? Just an opportunity to reflect upon what we value and how much weight we're giving to things in our daily lives versus, like you said, taqwa. Remembering Allah often and understanding that our end goal is to reach Jannah, and are the things we do on a daily basis stacking up our scales so that we can, when we meet Him at the end, is well pleased with us.
Right.
So alhamdulillah for your reflection.
And if I can add to what you were saying just real quick, but exactly what you said, like sometimes when we think of inequality, we always think it's the big things. We think it's like, gender and race, but a lot of times it stems from those small things, right? That we start to, say, oh, this is what's more, and then it grows into these big cultural or social standards. Right. That tells you I have to value someone else less than because of this or that.
Right. Yeah. Well, alhamdulillah that we have this opportunity. Inshallah, they will continue in the future, and people will have a chance to tune in. And I just want to thank you again, Sister Naimah, for coming on. And I'm pretty sure you'll receive a call from me again, maybe later in the year. Inshallah.
Okay.
Just because we enjoy having you so much, in your ability to take us deep into the Arabic and the understanding of the Arabic words and Arabic text. So, alhamdulillah, thank you, and assalamu alaikum.
Thank you. Wa alaikum assalam.
So please stay with us as we have a few announcements here. Please join us for the Resilience Con, the Muslim African American History Conference. I'll place the link for registration. There is a registration link in the comment section. I think also in the description there is a link to the registration of this. There will be 21 speakers coming from around the country and from locally that will be presenting at the Muslim African American History Conference on February 10th. Also February 9th, there will be various imams from this speaker list that will be speaking at the Khatibs at Juma on Friday. So please go to the link for the Saturday event and stay tuned for more information on the events around this weekend. Also, coming this year will be the 2024 Al-Mizan program expansion, which will include an Al-Mizan visiting lecturer series. These are in-person sister-led Taleem, sisters from around throughout the country. So there'll be a weekend event once a quarter related to the subject of the female companions of the Prophet, as well as the principles of women in the Quran. So please stay tuned for more information and dates related to this. In relation to this, there will also be a 2-day summer symposium with our female scholars from around the country as well. All of these events will be held at Masjid Al-Qur'an, located on 5922 Hillcroft Street. Inshallah, you have enjoyed our program for today with Sister Naimah Mustafa, and you enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Assalamu alaikum.